Achilles, the hero cursed with immortality. Legends are born not from a hero's strength, but from his weakness. For even the greatest warrior cannot defy his own destiny. He was blessed with immortality by a goddess. No blade could breach his flesh, no spear could pierce his armor. This is the story of Achilles, the hero who found his greatest curse in the very gift of his immortality. 1. Introduction. The price of divinity. The context of the hero's birth. Our story begins with the wedding of Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, the sea Nereid. Thetis was haunted by a prophecy. Her son, no matter how powerful, would die young. This fear drove her every move, turning a mother's love into a desperate, obsessive crusade against destiny itself. The ritual of the Styx. To cheat the fates, Thetis descended to the underworld, plunging her infant son into the river Styx. The waters granted him invulnerability. Every part of his body touched by the Styx became immune to mortal weaponry. He was rendered godlike, a figure of terrifying power. But the gift came with a fatal flaw. Thetis held the child securely by his heel. The small patch of flesh gripped by her fingers remained untouched by the potent water. This single, tiny oversight, a desperate, natural clasp, created the only flaw in his divine armor. The Achilles heel was born, a symbol of the ultimate irony of his fate. He was cursed with a power that hinged on one mortal vulnerability. 2. Early life and the prophetic choice. Mentorship and Thetis's fear. Achilles was raised in the wilderness, mentored by the wise centaur Chiron. Here, he mastered the arts of war, medicine, and philosophy. Yet the shadow of his short life loomed large. As the war drums of the Trojan conflict began to beat, the Greek chieftains needed their greatest weapon. Thetis, unwilling to lose him, took desperate action, hiding Achilles on the island of Skyros, disguising him as a maiden named Pyrrha, hoping to shield him from his inevitable fate. The unavoidable summons. The cunning Odysseus, guided by prophecy, discovered the ruse. He presented gifts, including a hidden sword. When a sudden war cry was sounded, Achilles instinctively tore off the disguise, seized the weapon, and rushed to defend. The warrior was revealed. Odysseus then laid out the truth. Achilles had a choice. A long, peaceful, and unremarkable life, his name fading into the dust, or glorious immortal renown, Kleos, followed by an early, spectacular death. Achilles, fueled by youthful pride and a fear of oblivion, did not hesitate. He chose the sword. He chose Kleos. He chose his early, inevitable death. 3. The siege and the price of hubris. Arrival and dominance. Achilles' arrival at Troy was a triumphant spectacle. With his fiercely loyal Myrmidons, he became the undisputed engine of the Greek war effort. The Trojans feared his very name. He was a literal force of nature. He captured surrounding cities, secured vital supplies, and amassed a vast collection of treasures and prisoners, establishing himself as a demigod among mortals. The Great Quarrel, Achilles versus Agamemnon. The core conflict of the entire war, the central theme of the Iliad, was fought between the two most powerful Greeks. Achilles acquired a beautiful captive, Briseis, treating her with unexpected compassion. When a plague struck the camp, the seer blamed Agamemnon's greed. Forced to yield his own prize, the arrogant high king sought to salvage his pride by publicly humiliating Achilles. He demanded Briseis. Achilles' superhuman ego was deeply bruised by this mortal insult. His honor, had been publicly destroyed by a lesser man, the Withdrawal and the gods' intervention. In an incandescent fit of rage, Achilles declared he would no longer fight. He withdrew his Myrmidons, abandoning the entire Greek cause for the sake of his injured pride. Agamemnon's greed and Achilles' hubris became a poison that seeped through the entire army. Achilles retreated to his ships and, in his pettiness, appealed to his mother, Thetis. He begged her to use her influence with Zeus to ensure the Greeks suffered catastrophic losses until Agamemnon was forced to grovel. Zeus agreed. This act solidified the tragic flaw in Achilles' character. His glory was fatally inseparable from his selfish, destructive rage. 4. Patroclus, the mirror and the loss, the bond of brotherhood. While Achilles languished in his tent, The war turned brutally against the Greeks. Hector pushed them back to their ships, threatening total annihilation. The only person capable of reaching Achilles' inner humanity was his closest companion, Patroclus, who served as his conscience and moral compass. Patroclus pleaded with Achilles not for honor, but for the dying Greek soldiers. Achilles finally relented, allowing Patroclus to wear his magnificent god-crafted armor, but with one absolute command: drive the Trojans from the ships, but do not pursue them toward the walls of Troy. The death of Patroclus. Patroclus, tasting the heady wine of glory, defied Achilles' explicit order, pursuing the retreating Trojans to the city walls. There, his fate met him. The god Apollo struck him, disarming and stunning him, and Hector dealt the killing blow, claiming the famed armor as a trophy. The moment Patroclus fell, the light left Achilles' world. The news of Patroclus's death was seismic. Achilles threw himself into the dust, howling with a pain that transcended human grief. His rage against Agamemnon vanished, replaced by a singular cold, consuming desire for vengeance against Hector. The loss of Patroclus stripped away Achilles' pride, leaving only raw, devastating human grief. He was no longer fighting for glory. He was fighting to reclaim the soul he had failed to save. 5. Vengeance and the Nadir of honor. The divine armor and the return. Thetis intervened again, bringing new armor forged by Hephaestus. Clad in this terrible panoply, Achilles returned to battle, a figure of unstoppable, terrifying fury. He massacred countless Trojans, driving them into the river Xanthus, clogging the waters with their bodies until the river god himself attacked him. He was a force of utter, merciless destruction. The duel. Finally, he cornered Hector, who stood alone outside the great Scaean gate. This duel was the climax of the Iliad. Hector fighting for his city and family, Achilles fighting only for vengeance and death. Hector asked Achilles for one final act of honor, to return his body for proper burial. Achilles' reply was chilling, the very essence of his grief-fueled mania. Dogs and vultures will eat you entirely. He killed Hector swiftly. Achilles' rage did not end with the death. He pierced Hector's ankles, lashed the body to his chariot, and drove in circuits around the city walls, dragging the revered body through the dust in a barbaric display of desecration, witnessed by Hector's wailing family on the ramparts. This moment marked the lowest point of Achilles' moral character. His grief had transformed him into a monster, devoid of the time he had once valued so highly. 6. Redemption, the ransom of Hector, the divine command, and Priam's plea. The gods, sickened by this sacrilege, intervened. Zeus sent Iris to Priam, instructing the elderly king of Troy to go to the Greek camp and ransom his son's body. Hermes guided Priam through the enemy lines. The scene that followed was one of the most poignant moments in literature. Priam, the king whose war Achilles had waged, fell to his knees, kissing the terrible, man-killing hands of the warrior who had murdered his son. He appealed to Achilles, not as a king, but as a father, reminding him of his own aged father, Peleus. A moment of humanity. Priam's profound sorrow broke through the hard shell of Achilles' grief. Achilles remembered his own father, whom he would never see again. The two enemies wept together, Achilles for Patroclus and Peleus, Priam for Hector and Troy. Achilles, finally purged of his self-destructive rage, accepted the ransom. He treated Priam with honor, shared a meal, and granted a temporary truce for Hector's funeral. This act of compassion was Achilles' true redemption. He regained the honor he had lost in the dust of the battlefield. It was a brief, profound moment of humanity, a final acceptance of his own mortality. 7. The final blow, the fall of the invincible. Following Hector's death, Achilles continued to fight, knowing his time was short. His end came not in the grand duel he deserved, but in a chaotic skirmish. The Trojan prince Paris, guided by the god Apollo, fired an arrow. The arrow, powered by divine will, flew straight and true, piercing the only vulnerable spot, his heel. Achilles fell. The greatest warrior of the age, invincible to countless swords and spears, was felled by a single, humble arrow. Legacy. Achilles died as he had chosen to live, in the pursuit of Cleos. His armor became the subject of a bitter feud. His bones were mixed with those of Patroclus, and buried beneath a great mound on the shore of the Hellespont. Achilles remains the ultimate archetype of the tragic hero, a man gifted with near immortality, yet whose short life was defined by the flaws of his mortal spirit. Achilles chose immortality, but his life ended with the ache of his pride, the bitterness of his hubris, and finally, the sting of a mortal arrow. He was the greatest warrior of all time, yet also its most tragic victim. His story whispers this truth to us. Even our greatest strength is counterbalanced by the smallest, most human weakness. So, what do you think was Achilles' greatest tragedy? His own overwhelming pride, or his mother's relentless attempts to defy his destiny? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this epic journey into mythology, please remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more content just like this. Until the next saga, take care.